this budget. The problem is that we're spending too much, getting bad returns on our investment. Is that the bottom line?
Well, I've said for many years that all the debate's on the wrong end of the equation. We talk about what we have to pay, and we ought to be talking about what we get. Everybody, Republican and Democrat, would agree that there's nothing wrong with asking the government to be efficient. There's nothing wrong with looking at what the government delivers and saying, are they doing that in the best possible way? Everybody would agree about that. All this carping about taxes all the time really misses the point.
Well, it does, but as long as you don't raise taxes before you answer that question. I agree with Franklin, but we talked about this last week on a local level. How can anybody make a honest argument against zero-based budgeting, for example? Why would you not be willing to look at your budget every year and say, we spent this money on this last year, do we really need to spend that again this year?
I absolutely agree with that idea, and I think the real problem is that when it comes to government, if it's just too difficult, they won't do it, okay? And I don't think there's any doubt at all that what we ought to do is, I think it's a patriotic duty to pay taxes first, all right? But secondly, I think it's the government's responsibility to spend our money wisely, period. Now, if they're not going to spend our money wisely, then we shouldn't be contributing as much as we do.
Make them accountable. We're going to have to take a break. It's 8:05. We're running a few minutes late. 614-5553 is our phone line here. I'm going to open up the line after we come back from break here. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to Backfire.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Wolf FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Checking the cash. We'll beat any rates that don't pay the max. We're Title Loan King. We'll make you all the things. Get on up and get down in the cash. A better title loan, you better believe it. A lower rate, we guarantee it. Checking the cash. We'll beat any rates that don't pay the max. Oh, yeah. Checking the cash is your money machine. Get on up and get down in the cash.
Checking the Cash offers title loans up to $2,500 at the lowest rate guaranteed. That's right. Bring them proof of lower rate, and Checking the Cash will beat it. What are you waiting for? Go to checkingthecash.com for a store nearest you.
The Bald-Headed Bistro has a brand new menu offering more value for your dollar. The Bald-Headed Bistro, Western fine dining in the heart of the South. The best bar and happy hour in town. The Bald-Headed Bistro in the Village Green, Cleveland.
There are many reasons to choose Buy Here, Pay Here USA for your next vehicle purchase. But don't take my word for it. Here's what our customers have to say.
Buy Here, Pay Here has a 6-month or 6,000-mile warranty. That was very important to me buying a used car.
I've recommended Buy Here, Pay Here USA 11 times. 11 new customers, 11 cars sold.
They worked with me on the payments too to set it to where it would be affordable within my budget.
I recommend Buy Here, Pay Here USA to anybody.
So visit Buy Here, Pay Here USA today.
When you buy or sell a pawn,
you can't go wrong at U.S. Money Shop.
When money's tight, you'll be alright.
For the least inside at U.S. Money Shop.
Hi, this is Glenn from U.S. Money Shops. Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, payroll checks, government checks, insurance checks, and many, many more.
On with us, we'll earn your trust. Sell to us
without any fuss.
Buy from us, you can rely on us.
Oh, one more thing. If you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off any purchase in our store. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail prices. So hurry into one of our 9 convenient locations or visit usmoneyshops.com for the one nearest you.
Buy or sell or buy today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
All right. Welcome back to Backfire. This morning we've got special guests Steve Crump and Scott Canavas in the studio with us. We've got our regulars here, Franklin Chancey and John Stanberry, and we're just having a great time this morning. 614-5553 if you want to give us a call. We've been talking a little bit about everything. One of the things that got my attention recently is the government response to the vote battery challenge. You know, the government is part owner of General Motors now. I think they still own roughly 28% of it. But anyway, there was a problem with the vote battery that didn't seem to get reported for quite a long time for some reason. And now they're running an investigation into it. Of course, you know we have to run investigations into everything. But anyway, they think that the government had a conflict of interest here and not bringing this out to the public's eye as much as they should have with the problem with the vote battery. Unlike the Toyota, when they got on Toyota not long ago about every little thing. So anyway, if you're familiar with it, we'll talk about it. Let's take a call. Good morning, you're live on Whoop.
Good morning, Dobo.
Good morning, Redhead.
I have a question.
Go ahead. I've got somebody here that can definitely answer it this morning.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see who's smart down there. I tried to get an answer to this yesterday and never did. All these churches that don't pay taxes, why not?
Oh, I'd love to handle that one.
Go ahead.
But before he does, this.
Do what?
Before he does, let me tell him this.
All right.
You have to pay every time you go to that graveyard and have somebody buried, and they get all that money tax-free. And they make money all the time.
Now say that, Red, let me make sure I'm clear on what you just said. Every time you go to the graveyard to bury somebody?
You pay for that gravesite.
Right.
And what do they do with all that money? Why do you not tax that?
Usually somebody owns that graveyard. That's a business.
Well, if it's a business, why don't they tax it?
They do. They are. It's just like there's deeds of title to cemetery plots that are out there, and taxes are paid on those plots when they're purchased. I don't know if it's an ongoing deal or not. Stephen would know more about that than
part of the issue in cemeteries is that there is a statutory requirement that if you own a cemetery, you have to have what's called a perpetual care fund. And when you buy a cemetery plot, what happens is there is a large portion of that that's supposed to go into a maintenance fund, because ultimately, whether it's a church or it's a business or it's an individual that owns that cemetery, those entities are going to no longer be here at some point in time. The idea is that this fund, which is like a trust fund, is there to see that the grass is mowed, that the fences are kept up, that the graves are maintained, even after all the relatives of the person who has died has moved or they've died themselves. So that's where that goes to, and why churches aren't taxed typically, historically, has been that from a constitutional perspective, that has been deemed an infringement on religion, prohibited by the Bill of Rights,
separation of powers,
and the separation of powers and church and state. Although it's not, it's what it comes down to is that a tax on a church is deemed to be an inhibiting of that religion, and so that's the reason it's not been taxed.
Well, I think they all should be taxed if everybody else has to pay it.
Who's everybody else?
I mean, everybody pays taxes. Why not the churches?
Okay. Well, this has been debated many, many times, I'm sure. So, anyway, Red, we'll get into that a little bit more.
All right.
Thanks. All right. I tell you, I'm going to change the subject a little bit. I thought our Governor Haslam came out and made an announcement that he was going to spend more money with education in the state of Tennessee that had gotten behind on the education fee. And then I noticed that President Obama came right out and said the states should be spending more money on education. So somehow we're working together. Good morning. You're live on Whoop.
Yes, sir. I agree with a lot of what y'all are saying about our government. Who does anybody know of anybody that can get in there and do a good job?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we all kind of agreed on up here. One real problem is us, the American people. You know, when we do send someone to Washington or to Nashville or to the courthouse in your local county, and they actually start to cut something that we like, we vote them out of office. We go, wait a minute, I didn't want you to cut me. I wanted you to cut someone else. The problem here as a country, and I'll get in trouble probably for this, but we have become very spoiled, very complacent. We don't think anything bad will ever happen to the country, and we want what we want, when we want it, the way we want it, and we want someone else to pay for it. The problem is, at some point, the American public has to accept that we can't spend unlimited amounts of money, and we have to agree to cut the size of government.
I agree with you 100%, but who's the man that can help us lead us in that direction?
I don't think it really comes down to one man or a group of men, really. What has to happen, honestly, is it has to be the resolve of us, the governed, to get the government that will, one, spend our money in an accountable way, and two, do the things that we basically want. You know, the preamble of the Constitution sets it out pretty clearly. You know, to establish justice, to make for a more complete and perfect union, to promote the general welfare, etc. Those kinds of things. The difficulty is that we have so many people vying for so many different things that it's just hard to satisfy everyone. Because right now, somebody you love is receiving Social Security. Well, somebody I know might want to cut Social Security. Once their ox is being gored, they'll be the first person to scream the most. Somebody wants to cut military defense. Well, somebody's going to be upset about that.
Well, let me say there is, you know, when you talk about looking for an individual and we talk about the public needing to step up to the plate, I several years ago didn't like the idea of term limits because I felt like the public ultimately could enforce their own term limits. But I've come to the conclusion that when you're in that office and it's a career job for you, it's not something you're doing for a few years to serve the public. It's your career. You buy votes, and you buy votes with other people's money, with the taxpayers' money. So I'm come to the conclusion that term limits are probably something we constitutionally need to look at, because once you're not going to be there forever, I think you can make some of these harder decisions a little easier.
I think term limits is what's got to happen in the future.
Well, no matter what anybody says.
How can the individual voter go towards term limits? What can he do to help get these term limits in place?
You got to elect somebody that favors them.
You got to call your representatives on the local level, on the state level, on the national level, and say we want some term limit legislation.
Well, I think, John,
thanks, caller.
John, you said initially on a constitutional basis, and I think that's the answer. There's a real question about the constitutionality of those types of limits. So if that's going to change, I think it would have to happen on that constitutional basis.
Oh, I agree.
And it doesn't matter how bad Congress is polling overall. Congress's numbers can be in the teens. But by and large, people think their representative is doing a great job. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Good morning, caller. You're live on Whoop.
Hey, guys, this is Ron Morris. Good to hear all my good friends sitting in there this morning.
All right.
Good morning, Ron.
I wanted to, first thing I heard something Steve Crump said there earlier, and I agree with him 100%, is that on the illegals, that the businesses, the reason they come here, we give them jobs. If they didn't have jobs, we wouldn't have illegals. So it's the businesses that are creating the problems, and we should prosecute those people for hiring illegal aliens. And so that's and Social Security problems. I want